Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Top 10s Net, and in the video today, we're looking at the top 10 nations that won't exist in 2115. It can often seem as though nations are permanent fixtures on the landscape, immovable, unchangeable, and enduring. But if history has taught us one thing, it's that nations are perfectly capable of disappearing. A number of top countries disappeared in the 20th century alone, including nations such as Austro-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and the superpower the USSR. Anyone expecting the 21st century to be any kinder is liable to be surprised. Here are some well-known nations that probably won't exist in 2115.
Number 10. Kiribati. Home to one of the largest protected areas in the world, the Phoenix Islands Protected Area, Kiribati is the epitome of a tropical paradise. Independent since 1979, Kiribati consists of a series of atolls and reefs with a smattering of little islands perched on top. The temperatures are a pleasant low 80s, coconut and breadfruit trees abound, and the waters are a lovely blue. If you feel like booking a vacation in Kiribati, however, you better make it snappy. Owing to rising sea levels, two of its islands have already been lost to the waves, Tebua Tarawa and Abu Anea, and the rest are threatened. While a few of the islands are expected to remain above water in 2115, what's left won't be able to support the agriculture needed to maintain a national population. The situation is desperate enough for President Tong to begin evacuating the islands already, the process sped up by Cyclone Pam. Official appeals have been made to Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji to accept Kiribatians as permanent refugees. Number 9. The Netherlands. It's easy to imagine tropical nations disappearing into the Pacific. What is less easily imagined is the loss of a European nation to climate change. Nevertheless, this is not only realistic, but it is in fact quite probable. Known as much for its dikes as being the place to go for legal drugs and prostitutes, much of the Netherlands is below sea level. Unlike Kiribati, it is not simply rising sea levels that threatens the Netherlands. An extremely modern nation with a powerful economy, the Netherlands can well afford to continue expanding its dikes upwards to keep rising seas out. The real problem is that the same dikes that keep the sea out can keep flooding in. With half the nation at or below 1 meter above sea level, the Netherlands has been constantly fighting to keep its head above water. In 1953, a massive storm slammed into the Netherlands and neighbouring Belgium. Floods as deep as 5.5 meters swept the southern parts of the country. Only the careful use of a ship to plug a dike prevented the flooding of North Holland, the second most heavily populated province. With many scientists predicting that previously safe Europe could soon be struck with frequent Hurricane Katrina-level storms, we'd book our Amsterdam holiday today, if we were you. Number 8. The United Kingdom. What many people often tend to forget is that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II is not only the Queen of England, she is the Queen of the United Kingdom. As early as Roman times, attempts to unite both the north and south of Britain had failed. The death of Queen Elizabeth, the first one in 1603, however, led to Parliament handing Scottish King James V the crown of England as well. In 1707, the now 100-year-old merger of the kingdom was formalised as the United Kingdom of Great Britain. These days, however, one of the most successful empires in history is facing a real possibility of dissolution. The union of the two kingdoms began to show cracks as early as 1853 when advocates began calling for Home Rule. In 1934, Scottish nationalists formed the Scottish National Party, which has of late been a champion of Scottish independence and separate membership in the European Union. Referendums calling for the dissolution of the United Kingdom have come up in Scotland roughly every 20 years since the 1970s. The first failed on a technicality, the second was wildly popular, and finally established the Home Rule that has been debated for nearly 150 years, but did not actually dissolve the Union. The most recent, 2014, failed by a narrow margin, but only 6 months later, the SNP swept the parliamentary elections on a wave of reaction to the narrow failure of the referendum. With 56 out of 59 seats possible and opinion polls showing growing support for another attempt, it seems likely that the United Kingdom will be no more by 2115. Number 7. Canada. Canada was the unhappy offspring of the 7 Years' War. While Great Britain and France were busy making a mess out of Europe between 1754 and 1763, their colonies in North America were having a pleasant and related brawl of their own. The end result was the addition of New France's fishing holes to the British Empire. Unlike Scotland, where the two nations acted like loving newlyweds for a while, French Canadians always approached things more like an unwelcome arranged marriage. Though becoming British in 1763, it wasn't until 1840 that serious attempts were made to properly un-Frenchify them. French Canada was merged with the rest of Canada, with their main population becoming the province of Quebec. The French didn't think much of the idea, but went along with it, mostly out of a fear of being invaded by the expansionists in the US, which was fairly reasonable given its history with Mexico. In the post-World War II world, the US stopped seeming to be the threat it had been, and the French Canadians haven't really felt a particular need to keep cooperating. Starting in the 60s, a significant percentage of Quebec has been calling for sovereignty, led by the party Québécois. The most recent vote on the issue failed by only 1% of the vote. With almost a quarter of the Canadian population, most of the Atlantic ports, and total control of the St. Lawrence waterway, the loss of Quebec could lead to the rest of Canada splitting up under pressure from regional differences and First Nation sovereignty movements. Number 6. Taiwan. Taiwan is in an interesting position. While many people are aware of the fact that China insists Taiwan is still a part of China, what they don't tend to recall is that Taiwan says the exact same thing. The only real debate between the two is which government is the legitimate one, the pre-World War II Republic of China government seated in Taiwan, or the post-war People's Republic of China in Beijing. Regardless of the politics, the fact is, in terms of actual operation, Taiwan is a wholly independent nation, and has acted as one ever since Chiang Kai-shek led his Kuomintang government to Taiwan in 1949. Despite its own insistence that it is not, it maintains diplomatic relations with many of the world's nations, and it maintains its own military, purchasing heavily from trade partner America. It also has a democratically elected government that has unchallenged rule over the island. If it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck. Still, the fact that both Taiwan and China insist that Taiwan is just a part of China goes a long way to removing the island's nationhood. Events over time have further eroded this position, such as the UN's kicking Taiwan out and giving China the empty seat in 1971. While there are some within Taiwan calling for an official declaration of independence, the official government stance still calls for eventual reunion with mainland China, and only 24% of the population responded favorably to an independence call during a January poll. As such, it is only a matter of time before Taiwan returns to the fold. Number 5. North Korea. Just like China and Taiwan, North and South Korea both insist on an eventual reunion. Unlike the first two, however, there is little doubt about how the second two will eventually work out their reintegration. China and Taiwan are both powerful in their own right, with strong economies, powerful technological potential, and stable governments. On the Korean peninsula, on the other hand, such priority does not exist. North Korea, the result of the USSR insisting on having control over the northern half of Japan's pre-World War II colony, is in the crapper. Of the 193 member states of the United Nations, North Korea's per capita GDP comes in at 180th. The government runs entirely on the principle of the cult of personality, with director Kim Jong-un conducting near-constant purges of the top ranks to keep things under control. The only thing that North Korea can boast of is a strong military, and the few high-ranking defectors have spoken of coup attempts by the military that have been ruthlessly kept out of the media. Most pundits consider it to be only a matter of time before North Korea implodes under a weight of suspicion and backstabbing. When the inevitable event occurs sometime before 2115, South Korea will be ready to take North Korea back into a united country and start repairing the damage done by the Kim clan. Similar to what happened when East Germany was reunited with the West in 1990. Number 4. Palestine. Palestine occupies a strange position on the family tree of nation-states today. While most of the top powers of the world do not recognize it as a nation, more than 2/3 of the UN's member states do. Palestine has a seat in the UN, though it does not have a vote. Its government has shockingly little real power, as it often finds itself the subject of Israel's wrath thanks to unilateral actions on the part of radical groups inside its border, but it has recognized borders, a standing, if small, army, and a self-contained economy. Unfortunately, Palestine is the weakest kid in a particularly bad neighborhood. Most of the country is occupied by Israel as a buffer against terrorist groups. Jordan, sharing the other significant border with it, is a stable nation, but has been struggling with the instability in nearby Syria and Iraq. Jordan has been careful to be polite but standoffish in order to avoid buying even more border trouble. Egypt has plenty of problems of its own, and Turkey and Iraq are both having big trouble with ethnic separatists, so they are the last nations to be jumping aboard any separatist support trains. Given the combination of Israeli hostility and significant instability among the Arabic states close at hand, Palestine's severe government weakness is likely to result in Palestine becoming a failed state. Portions that contain Israeli settlements will likely wind up fully annexed in spite of international condemnation, while what remains could well wind up falling under the control of a UN mandate, possibly regulated by Jordan. A Palestinian state is highly unlikely to exist as a national entity in 2115. Number 3. Sudan. South Sudan is the newest nation in the world. It is also likely to be one of the shortest-lived nations in the world. It was formed in 2011 after a referendum for independence from Sudan passed with nearly 99% of the vote. That, however, was the one and only time anyone seemed to be able to agree about anything. Externally, South Sudan can't seem to nail down any agreements regarding its border and trade relationship with Sudan. When it left, it took all of Sudan's oil fields, but Sudan retained all the infrastructure to transport the oil away from these fields. Since then, oil revenues have stagnated, owing to a failure to negotiate a profit-sharing deal, and both nations have had small proto-wars over how to split up their resources. Internally, South Sudan hasn't had any better luck. 9 of its 10 provinces are suffering armed conflicts as various tribal and ethnic groups fight one another, and all of them fight a government having a civil war with itself. South Sudan is, at heart, a microcosm of all the problems an increasingly overpopulated world faces and is unlikely to survive them for the next 10 years, let alone long enough to see 2115. Number 2. Haiti. If there ever was a nation that had bad luck, it's Haiti. Even before its war for independence, it was a bad luck state. Consisting mostly of slaves at heart, Haiti has always suffered from nearly every problem that's killing the nations already listed so far. Haiti has suffered from ethnic cleansing, courtesy of the neighboring Dominican Republic in the 30s, has constantly suffered from severe poverty and the accompanying armed revolts, and has been the object of affection of nearly every natural disaster and disease imaginable. All of these problems are now being compounded by the same climate change threatening Kiribati in the Netherlands. Hurricanes are only growing worse as the ocean warms, and Haiti is ground zero for any hurricane that doesn't turn towards the east coast of the US. Between that, rising sea levels, desert-generating deforestation, and earthquakes, substantial portions of Haiti are at threat of one mass destruction too many. Seemingly doomed from the beginning, it is perfectly reasonable for Haiti itself to become a zombie-like creature, not really alive, but not really dead. Unable to recover from disasters, economic and natural, Haiti may well eventually resort to turning itself over to the UN or a better-behaved Dominican Republic, out of a desperate hope that they might be able to keep something in that half of the island alive in 2115. Number 1. Sealand. Sealand is a nation that has no chance of seeing 2115, as it never really was a nation to begin with. When Germany demanded a rematch with England, the embattled nation came up with some truly strange military ideas to bring to the fight. Most of them never saw the light of day, but one that did was HM Fort Ruffs. Essentially, this was 2 concrete pylons sunk into the English Channel 6 miles offshore. The UK built a platform holding anti-aircraft guns to shoot down German bombers on the way to the Blitz. After the war, the guns were removed and the platform abandoned. In 1967, eccentric Paddy Bates took over the platform for use in pirate radio. After an argument over a buoy that led to the platform being raided by Her Majesty's Marines and the arrest of Paddy, the British courts declared that, as the platform was 3 miles outside of the 3-mile limit, Britain had no control over the platform. Paddy immediately took advantage of this and declared the creation of the Principality of Sealand, with himself the reigning prince. After a dispute with Prime Minister Alexander Achenbach, this led to the invasion of the platform by hired mercenaries. The heir and current reigning prince, Michael Bates, led a commando raid consisting of himself, a family friend, and a rented helicopter to reclaim Sealand. Achenbach and his mercenaries, all German citizens, were captured and only released after Germany sent an ambassador to negotiate their release. Owing to the British court decision and the German ambassadorial mission, the Bates family has continued to maintain Sealand as an independent micronation. However, without some serious intervention by both politicians and engineers, Sealand won't see 2115. In 1987, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea extended all national borders from 3 miles to 12 miles out, resulting in Sealand now falling inside of British waters. At the time, it specifically ruled that artificial islands and structures cannot be recognized as establishing a territorial claim. Though Britain has yet to act on this, that rule means that the UK can reclaim the platform at any time, and the rest of the world will simply shrug. It may, however, be a moot point. Recent research has shown that the global conditions created by climate change will be far more destructive to concrete and iron. As such, it is likely the already somewhat rotten structure may quickly become untenable. It is likely that long before 2115, Sealand will become seafloor.
So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If there are any countries you think won't exist in 2115 or sooner or later, let us know in the comments below. It's what they're for. I'd love to know your opinion about this video, about the countries we came up with, and about your own. And if you did like it, do click that like button below. It really helps us out. And do subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every day. Over there on the right, a couple of other videos you'll probably enjoy if you enjoyed this one. There is the top 10 richest cities with serious poverty problems, and below that, we've got the top 10 cities of the future. Thanks for watching.